The Canon EOS R5 Mark I came out in 2020, a time where a lot of people weren't really purchasing cameras, but it still made a big splash, especially for Canon, who was not innovating at the time. But back in the day, or back in the GH4 days, and a little bit earlier on the Panasonic Micro Four Thirds days, is another camera that came out right after the GH4, which made a big splash for 4K and mirrorless or hybrid camera use, is the Panasonic G7. This Panasonic G7 is really like I want to say, a camera that you can just pull out of a vending machine. This vending machine camera has no build quality. It's very, very plasticky, very, very lightweight. But if somebody was walking around vlogging and doing some simple stuff, it could be a really good camera. It's a Micro Four Thirds camera, which means it does not pick up as much light as a full frame camera per situation. So if you're in a situation where you're at certain settings, the full frame camera is always going to pick up light. Regarding the settings are the same, the input of light is the same. So with all that said, back in the day, the 5D Mark IV paled in comparison to the Panasonic G7, a $400 camera that wasn't even on the same tier as the GH4, which got all the popularity. Let's see how the G7 stacks up against its 5-year younger Canon EOS R5. I'm just curious. I know the G7 is older. I know the G7 shouldn't be able to outdo the R5, but let's see what the R5 Mark I does up against the G7. Now, what I did here was I tried to get all the settings the same. It's auto white balance, 4K 24 on all the videos except the last two. I did 4K 24 for all the videos for the Panasonic, but since the Canon can do 4K HQ, I did 4K HQ, and then on all the Canon videos, except for the last one, is 4K standard. And then I did one that's in 8K on the Canon, just to compare the 4K 24, which is the largest resolution on the G7, just to see exactly how they were going to do up against each other at the larger formats of the Canon. And the reason why I did that is because just because you have a camera that does 8K and 4K doesn't mean it's a sharp 8K and 4K. So essentially this is a sharpness test, but I did it at different ISO values to see how sharp it is over the ISO range. Now with the Panasonic G7, you can only do ISOs and full stops. So it goes from like 200 to 400 to 800, 1632 and 6400. And I just mimicked that on the R5. Here we go. Now, seeing all these videos, I've noticed that, of course, the R5 is just really winning on all fronts. But the white balance was hard for me to track. I see it getting, kind of more warm, a little bit more orangey, a little bit more reddish magenta, where the Panasonic is a little bit more neutral and it's a little bit cooler on the greenish side. And then you also have the fact that I put everything in standard. This is standard for Canon, standard for Panasonic. But it seems like the white balance is just a little bit jumpier. Yeah, I did have it in a situation where lighting could have been, a little mixed on the white balance side, but they really weren't filmed too, separate. Like my batteries on my lights pretty much stayed up the whole time. So that's something to think about. All right, so here's the big surprise. Out of all the videos, I have here the standard 4K from Canon and, of course, the standard 4K. I'm talking about, when I say standard for the Canon, I'm talking about, quote unquote, the one that's not high quality. The not high quality 4K 24 from Canon is softer than the G7 at 4K regular. But the colors are not standing up to the colors that's in Canon. I understand the white balance is a little off, but once you get the white balance corrected, it looks like Canon is winning over the Panasonic G7 in the color range, but not in the sharpness. So if you want a nice sharp image from the Panasonic, I would go use it instead of using standard 4K. And then you got 4K HQ, which I was using the whole time pretty much for the Canon. And then you have the 8K, which of course, just like you thought, the R5 overtakes the G7 and looks really, really well. It looks really, really well. So all in all, guys, it looks here that in most cases, at any ISO, you would use the Canon R5 HQ 4K to beat the Panasonic. But it looks like if I were to use like the standard low quality 4K on the R5 at any ISO, I'll probably take the Panasonic G7s. And then you also have the 8K, which I'm pretty sure at any ISO, the 8K is going to be better than the Panasonic. The only thing about the 8K you want to watch out for is that higher ISO value, you're probably going to get a lot more noise, even though it might still be sharper than the Panasonic G7. But these are my thoughts, guys. The colors are generally better on the Canon, in my opinion, even though the white balance is a little off. But I do like the colors coming from the Panasonic. It's very, very usable, very, very malleable, very, very, I want to say, if you were shooting in like a D-Log or Cinelite D or Vlog, it would look really, really good. All right, guys, stay tuned for the next video.